Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we have the latest from the live radar. We're in for the latest weather warnings, as we do have rain and wind warnings issued for the rest of Saturday going into Sunday morning, as we are going to see some very heavy rain, especially in northern and western areas. And as this system clears northwards and eastwards, there is the chance that as it develops and moves through, we could see a spell of very strong winds in a small area. So that's why we've got this wind warning issued at the moment. We'll look at that in detail on the latest UKV, looking at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. This is, of course, looking very unsettled over the next 24 to 36 hours, but into next week, things settle down and we see almost the exact opposite. Pretty much bone-dry conditions for most, especially in the west. Some showers could creep in the east, and this is as we see an easterly wind starting to develop. Now, of course, we normally associate easterly winds with very cold conditions during the winter months, but being so early on in the autumn, it's going to be chilly, but it's not going to be anything too remarkable. Temperatures down towards the mid-teens by day and potentially in towards the mid-single digits overnight, and there is the chance maybe Monday, Tuesday of seeing some overnight frosts. As we progress into the longer term, this high pressure system that's bringing these easterly winds isn't really going to go anywhere, or at least that's what most runs are showing. This is going to remain as a blocking area of high pressure in and around the UK. The big thing though is that the wind direction could shift. Some runs are starting to predict that it's going to shift slightly further eastwards, and we could see more of a southeasterly or even southerly airflow, which could allow those temperatures to rise further into the latter portion of September into early October. So that's something we'll look at in a bit more detail in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which do like and subscribe. Now, if you start on the live radar, of course, you can see this big area of heavy rain moving through at the moment, this conveyor belt of moisture that we've seen over the past 24 to 48 hours. Now, of course, it was much lighter yesterday, and as expected, it's really pepped up, and we've now seen kind of the heaviest pulses now moving through in western and northern areas. It is slowly going to transition eastwards, clearing the southeast through Sunday, and that's where we get this very cold northerly wind starting to push in. Now, one little change we've seen is that along this, we are now seeing a development of a smaller area of low pressure. Now, it's nothing extreme. The pressure is dropping here ever so slightly. But what it does is it provides a centre to this system and does potentially pep up those winds and the rain. You can already see this little hook developing down towards the southwest. And as this moves northwards and eastwards, not only could we see some really heavy torrential rain, maybe a few embedded thunderstorms that you can start to see coming around on the edges of this hook. And of course, the winds really pepping up inside this little area. So that's something we need to keep a very close eye on throughout this afternoon and evening, and that's why we have got those wind warnings in force. Now, further eastwards, we're still in the warm, humid air, so if you're outside today, it might feel still quite stuffy, but the temperatures are not going to rise anywhere near as high as they were yesterday, where we got up to about 27 degrees, and that's because the cloud and rain is moving in, holding those temperatures more towards the low 20s today. To the northwest of this system, conditions are a little bit better. Still some showers around associated with this low, and we're starting to see some colder northerly winds pushing in and some showers moving in for northern Scotland. You can even see a few little bits of blues in there, so over the highest peaks of the Scottish mountains, maybe a little bit of winteriness falling out of these showers as we see this northerly wind pushing in. Now, if you look at the temperatures, you can see big contrast at the moment to the south and the east of the system. Still warm-ish conditions. The very warm, hot air is now well to our east. Much colder conditions are pushing in from the north, and those are just going to get exacerbated over the next 24 hours or so. If you do put on the wind speeds, you can see at the moment strong winds in that southwest corner, and that could pep up over the coming hours as that moves inland. And if we look at the past 24-hour precipitation, you can see that conveyor belt of moisture there around the Irish Sea, where we've seen a lot of rain over the course of the last few days, and it's going to increase, especially as it pushes eastwards, and further areas across the Midlands and northern England, Yorkshire, for example, could see another inch or two of rainfall before this system has cleared through. Now, if you look at the latest weather warnings, we have got the rain warning that is in force. If we go down, you can see it has been updated this morning, and you can see the likelihood of impacts has been increased to reflect the increasing confidence, particularly across North Wales and Northern England later on Saturday afternoon and evening. So that's for that really heavy stuff starting to move through, and the warning has been removed from Scotland, whilst Humberside, so further eastwards across Yorkshire, has been added with the end time brought forward. So you can see close to an amber warning. Unlikely to see an amber warning issued simply because we are so close to this kind of clearing up now, so it would be issued at very short notice. As you can see, it does clear at 3 a.m. through Sunday morning. We're looking at widely 20 to 30 millimetres of rain, so an inch of rainfall on the live radar as we saw a minute ago. That's sort of around those yellowy colours, darker green yellow. So quite a few areas have already seen that inch or two of rain, and some areas could see maybe 60 to even 80 millimetres over the next few hours. If we look at the winds, you can see we have got this wind warning issued. And the reason for this is a developing area of low pressure, that little system down towards the southwest, may produce a short spell of very strong winds. They'll initially strengthen across some western and southwestern areas before migrating northwards and eastwards. So they're strengthening across the southwest at the moment, and the migration further northwards and eastwards, that's coming imminently over the next few hours. 50 to 60 quite widely inland, maybe up to 65 to 75 across some coasts. I will stress, though, it is very much dependent on the development of the system. If the system doesn't really develop too much, which is a nowcast kind of situation where the models are not really agreeing on it, if this very small system does develop a lot, then we could see these sort of winds. If it doesn't develop much, then maybe only 40 or 50 miles per hour. So very much dependent. And you can see it's medium impact, low likelihood, and it was only issued a couple of hours ago and expires at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. And you can see those wind warnings are still in force, wind and rain warnings still in force into Sunday there. Now, if you look at the latest UKV now, you can see all of that rain moving through over the next few hours, really pepping up through this afternoon before slowly moving out eastwards and northwards out into the North Sea as it does clear. Into the early hours of Sunday, we see a bit more rain and showers pushing through, but it all clears by around Sunday afternoon, and this is where we start to see those colder northerly winds starting to push in. But of course, it's much drier. It's a drier air mass coming in from the Arctic. As we head into Monday, the wind veers to more of an easterly, and you can see a few showers and some thicker cloud could push in from the east, but largely Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, it is looking pretty dry. Yes, some weather fronts could start to approach from the west, but at the moment, for most areas, not really expecting there to be much rainfall around throughout next working week at all, really. It is going to be chilly, though, if we do put on the upper air temperatures. You can see that it's very warm in the southeast still at the moment, but that cold Arctic air is moving in, and it moved in for all by Sunday afternoon and evening, and will be pretty dominant through much of the week. Yes, it moderates as the week goes on, just simply because it is still very early on in the autumn, so the sunshine and the ground temperatures will warm up those upper air temperatures, but progressively it will remain pretty chilly indeed. If you look at those max temperatures, you can see as we head through Saturday afternoon, as I'm recording this, max around 20 degrees in the far east, but elsewhere around the mid-teens or even low teens further northwards, so turning much, much colder. And then into Sunday, it is chilly for all, maybe peaking at 15 or 16 at best. And again, that doesn't factor in the feel-like temperature, which could be down towards the low teens there. Further northwards, single digits in some spots, so feeling really cold for the latter portion of September. Into Monday, look at this, a frost quite widely in northern areas, in the rural countryside, but further southwards 5 or 6 degrees, which is still very cold for late September. And again, temperatures peaking around the mid-teens or low teens, maybe a 17 there in the far south. Tuesday again could be an isolated frost in the morning, but progressively throughout the week the upper air temperatures rise, and so will the surface temperatures, maybe touching 18 or 19 by the end of the week. So returning closer to average, but probably still feeling quite chilly, inevitably with that north and northerly wind and eventually easterly flow. So yes, conditions turning much drier next week, but turning much, much colder, especially the early part of the week, for temperatures do return closer to average by the end of the week, but still probably feeling quite fresh and quite chilly out there. Now, if we finally just have a look at those wind gusts throughout the rest of this afternoon and evening, you can see as we head through the evening, not seeing anything too noticeable across the northern areas, but you see that real strengthening out in the North Sea. And I think the risk at the moment is if that strengthening occurs a little bit more over land, and if it does, then we could see 40 to 50, maybe 60 miles per hour. There's a few little areas of orange there that are creeping up as that system moves through around sunset this evening. But I definitely want to keep a very close eye on. So again, all we need is 1 or 2 really big gusts, and there could be quite considerable damage and issues. Now, if you have a look now at the longer range forecast, you can see at the moment we've got those northerly winds starting to push in over the next 24 hours as that low clears. It will topple the high, and then it will rebuild closer to Scandinavia. We will see those easterly winds for much of next week. However, later on next week, we see the high pressure moves a little bit, and that easterly gets cut off by next weekend, and it turns more into a southeasterly or even southerly flow. Now, there is the risk of some low pressure systems getting caught up in that. That was what the UKV was starting to hint at around the day 5, day 6 range, with potentially some weather fronts pushing in. But high pressure should eventually win out, and you can see even here, around 300 hours, big strain coming from the Atlantic with these big lows to the south of Greenland, but high pressure towards Scandinavia is still holding those lows off, and by the end of the run, that high hasn't moved anywhere. It's blocked stationary towards Scandinavia and Denmark, and you can see it's actually putting up a pretty strong southerly wind, and this is actually going to put up some very warm air for the time of year there for early October. Again, nothing record breaking, but potentially temperatures could be as high as the mid-20s, because if we zoom in, you'll be able to see those temperatures by day won't be too bad at all, maybe up towards the high teens. As I said, maybe low to mid-20s if we get the exact right conditions. But you can see here 20 degrees there at midday, could be a few degrees higher, and again will depend on how persistent and how sunny this pattern is. So GFS today does keep that high pressure around for the foreseeable future, does see some strain, does see some weather fronts thrown our way, but generally speaking that high goes absolutely nowhere for the next couple of weeks. The only thing we see changing is the air masses, which do look like they could get warmer if we see more of a southerly tilt to the higher pressure. Now, if you compare to the GM, it's very similar over the coming days. Those northerly winds pushing in, the blocking high moves towards Scandinavia, holds the weather fronts off for much of next week. Low pressure tries to push in from the southwest, but this low gets trapped. It gets stationary, cut off from the flow, and disintegrates away, and that high goes absolutely nowhere. So very similar, to be honest, to the latest GFS. Again, uncertain how much this high will be able to hold off these weather fronts. You can see they are piling in off the Atlantic, but by day 10 we're in a southeasterly flow. Conditions are fairly warm, and you can see rain isn't too far away, but from the looks of this latest run, very similar to the GFS. We do hold it, and we go towards the 20-degree mark. So yes, looking pretty chilly, very chilly in fact, over the next few days into the middle of the working week. But progressively, things are going to warm up once again. If we're lucky with a southerly or southeasterly wind, we could actually look a little bit more summer-like there by the end of the run out towards day 10, towards the early portion of October. So it just shows you this time of year into autumn, we can see easterly winds, or we can see these blocking highs to our east that are cold, but they also can be warm. All depends on the wind direction, and we're starting off cold here and turning warmer on the longer term, or at least that's what the operational runs are suggesting today. Now, if you look at the ECMWF, it does suggest a slightly different pattern. Again, that high brings easterly winds in for much of next week. The lows push through, and they have a little bit more success. That little trapped low towards our south actually does push in, and you can see the Atlantic is having some more success here towards 360 hours, and the high holds off for a long period of its run. But it does look like right towards the early portion of October, the lows do win out, and we do see the jet stream starting to unlock once again. You can see at the moment it is massively amplified, and that amplification is locking that high in place next week. But you can see it returns a little bit flatter there out towards early October, and that could allow those lows to pile back in off the Atlantic. So already hints there from the ECMWF that things could turn a bit more unsettled into early October. But at least for the next week to 10 days, high pressure looks like it is going to be fairly dominant once we get rid of all the rain over the next 24 hours. Now, if you look at the latest ensemble, we see the big drop in upper air temperatures around London and the southeast at the moment, from around 17 or 18 degree mark through yesterday evening down towards freezing or a couple of degrees below freezing by Sunday afternoon. You can see for much of the week we're below average, but by the end of the week, by next weekend, we return just about towards average, and that's where those more warm southeasterly winds could take over. And you can see we do just cross the 1991-2020 mean. I'm not seeing anything too incredible, but perhaps getting a couple of degrees above average there, because the operational run gets about 5 degrees or 6 degrees above average there into early October. And you can see there are some big precipitation spikes. Those will be because of trapped lows, cut-off lows that do develop, that we saw a few of those on the operational runs. But generally speaking, it is looking pretty dry, which is definitely a big positive. If we look at the sea level pressure, looking high pressure, looking high and dry into this working week. A little bit faltering longer term, but that's just uncertainty coming in. Still generally on the high pressure side though for the foreseeable future. And if we finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, it's very, very similar. Big drop in upper air temperatures and staying pretty cold throughout much of this working week. A good 5+ degrees below average, about 8 degrees below average for Monday and Tuesday. Then we kind of get a correction back towards average by next weekend. Precipitation does pick up though, and again that is symbolic from that ECMWF operational run, which did have that high, but it had it slightly further eastwards and slightly weaker, which did allow weather fronts to make more of an intrusion. So that's something to keep a close eye on. But it is very similar with the upper air temperatures, and hopefully the drier sort of pattern does win out. But no promises through the end of September, early October. We'll have to just wait and see. But definitely good signs if you want something slightly drier to end September and start October. And maybe, maybe, warmer. We do need very specific southeasterly winds to get those warm air masses in. If it's more of a flat easterly or northeasterly, then unfortunately it probably will be cooler and chillier. And if it's more of a southerly, maybe southwesterly, that's most likely because low pressure is much closer by, then there would be showers. So really need that specific southeasterly or south-southeasterly to get those warm conditions. But yeah, fingers crossed that does come off. Both the GM and the GFS had it for at least a few days. So we'll wait and see. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you do stay safe out there through the next kind of 24 hours, getting through all this rain and wind. And then, of course, the colder conditions do come over the next few days. Risk of maybe a little bit of ice here or there in the north. But after that, it's looking dry, chilly, but hopefully warmer as we head towards the end of this working week. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you again for another video soon.